everybody. My name is Ingrid Rekedal, and I was the artistic director for Requiem for the Living and Opera.
And I'm Tyler Umpleby, and I was student assistant first semester, and I am production manager now this semester.
So we're going to talk about student leadership in the creative process, specifically the creative process of the opera that we created this year.
So we made this little timeline to give you an idea of what things looked like with the opera. So I'm going to start at the beginning, work all the way up through today. So last year, about a year ago, applications came out for phase 1 of the project, which was the creative side of the project. Applications came out for writers, composers, and then the student assistant, which I ended up receiving in early May. We worked all the first semester with this team of writers and this team of composers. The writers worked to write the libretto, which is the text of an opera, and the composers worked to write the score, which is the music of an opera. So in early May, right during the summer, we started pre-planning. I got a couple emails from Dr. Wilson and the rest of the faculty team to start thinking through what we wanted the opera to look like, what we wanted to do with what we had. And then at the beginning of September, right when we got to school, we had our first creative team meeting. We sat in a room for a couple hours with all the writers, all the composers, and all the faculty team members, and we started processing what our opera was going to look like. We started talking about the organization of the orchestra, how long we wanted the opera to be. Originally, we set out to write one act 25-minute opera, or two individual one-act 25-minute operas. Quickly, that became a much longer opera. The writers took control of the project in early September and started writing, and as they got into the project, they realized that they were going to be better able to write a more quality opera if they had more time to work with. So they wrote us what we thought was going to be about an hour and a half of a libretto. And once the composition team started composing in early October, they quickly realized that it was going to be much longer than that. And what we ended up with was a 2-hour full 2-act opera. In the end of October, we went to go see Turandot at Nashville Opera at TPAC. And that sparked something really cool in our project. First, the composers were really inspired by the music of Puccini because he's incredible. And they spent most of that night composing a lot of the music that you hear today in the opera. But beyond that, Dr. Wilson sent an email to the education advisor with the Nashville Opera. And through a stream of emails and compliments and nice words, we were given the opportunity to get a discounted rate at the Noah Liff Center, which is the Nashville Opera's black box theater. So we will be performing this upcoming Saturday at the Noah Liff Center. So that's a really cool experience that we've been able to get through this. Then in December, applications came out for phase 2 of the project, which is an actual production of the opera.
It's fine.
So those applications came out. We ended up through the current students looking through the applications and the faculty looking through the applications and us deciding together, we chose these people to be phase 2A. So this is the leads of the production team, Ingrid, the director, assistant director, Zach, and Sadie and Jordan as voice coaches, and then our stage manager and assistant stage manager. Then later on in the production, we recruited phase 2B, which was more of the people who were going to carry out these people's vision. So back to the timeline. Beginning of February, we had auditions for the opera, a cast of about 20 people, and rehearsals began. In that time period, the final draft of the score was given to us. It took several months to compose, it took a month or so to write, and in the process of that, the technical design had started. We had started working through what the opera was going to look like and what it was going to sound like from the stage. And that brings us all the way up through performances, which started Thursday.
So we're going to talk about the responsibilities of an artistic director, which is phase 2, and then come back to what Tyler's job was, because he came through the whole process. I came in around December when we chose the phase 2 team and began the process of finding a vision that I could create and communicate. That is the number one job of an artistic director, is to find and communicate vision. So I took the libretto home, the words, over Christmas break and read it through many times and talked to my assistant director, Hillary, a lot about themes and what what do we want the audience to take away when they leave the opera at the very end? What do we want them to feel and know? And our conclusion was that this is a story of friendship and faithfulness more than anything else. It's about community and staying in community no matter what life throws at us. Also, I started the initial ideas for design. What do we want the audience to see on stage? Colors and set, those kind of things. And I took those just really broad ideas and gave them to the specific people that were appointed to oversee those things. So I said, okay, Tim Crummer, who is our technical designer, this is my kind of vision for the set. What can you do with that? And he brought it to life. And then later, the same thing with our makeup and hair people, etc. I guess the longest job, what I spent the most time on, was blocking and choreography. Every night, I led rehearsal. Sadie was in one room as our choral master teaching music, and I was in the other room teaching blocking, which is the staging and movement of the opera, and choreography. We have one dance number in our show, and I choreographed that. And that is just a blast to help the actors and the performers flesh out the meaning behind their characters and behind the story. And then I worked very closely with Tyler through the whole process to oversee the music team, the technical team, and the performers. We had a production team meeting every week to make sure that things were flowing smoothly. What have we done? What can we do next? And we also had a meeting with the faculty each week as our advisors. So I could not explain all the things that I've learned this semester, but I broke them down into 3 different ways that you can understand student leadership. You can go to the first one. The first one is being a student of leadership techniques. So literally learning how to be a leader. And I did that, I learned that from faculty in our advising meetings, from my peers a ton, and mostly from trial and error. Lots of times I would come into rehearsal and have a plan and then decide that there was something better that could be done. Other times I came out of rehearsal and said, I should have done other things better. And I learned as I went, but it was a joy to do. The second is being a leader of other students. This was a tricky thing for everyone involved. What does it mean to be friends with someone and then come into a space and then lead them or take leadership from someone else? And I found the most helpful thing was to create a threshold, to say, okay, when I walk into Benson Auditorium and I cross that threshold, I am now director. And so I stand with more poise and I talk a little bit louder, do all the teachery things. My friends totally respected that and said, okay, in this space I will regard you as my director. And then learning equally how to step out of that threshold back into the rest of Trevecca and go to dinner afterwards and then just be Ingrid and make that transition again. The third is maintaining a leadership role while being an academic student. This was the hardest physically because it didn't feel like there was enough time often. But so I spent lots of late nights, but it was really worth it, and it all came out of collaboration and encouragement from my peers and those also doing the same thing as me, and from my educators as well. Those are the 3 things overarching that I learned about student leadership.
And I'm going to echo pretty much everything she said there here in a second. But here's a couple of my responsibilities as a student assistant and production manager. It was pretty much the same both semesters. First responsibility was to organize and plan meetings and give deadlines, or assist in giving deadlines to the creative teams and to the production team as we moved into that process. And then secondly, and probably the most important, was communicating with the different teams that were working all at the same time, and also communicating with the faculty, letting them know where we stood on the project, and letting the students know where the faculty wanted us to go, what we were doing well, and what we needed to improve on. And then the third thing, facilitating the process with the faculty assistants. I spent a lot of time making sure the writers were being diligent and writing, even though that wasn't a big struggle. I spent a lot more time working with the composers, making sure that they were being diligent. Artists are weird. So, 4 things that I felt were the biggest things that I'm going to walk away from this project learning and understanding a little more of. The first being communication. I learned a lot about communicating with people in power above me, the adults around me, the people that I have to answer to and get the pleasure to answer to. And then also communicating with the students on my teams, which were my peers, but also people who needed to answer to me. Secondly was positivity. There's a lot of things that can go wrong in this process. There's a lot of things that will go wrong, and there's a lot of things that did go wrong in this process. So being able to keep that positive air about me, no matter what was thrown at us, and being able to motivate my team to also have that positive attitude, even though they're spending 24 hours in a music lab writing music because it has to be done, because it's rehearsal week. Thirdly, flexibility was huge because of those things that went wrong and because of the things that went right. We went from writing a 25-minute opera to writing a 2-hour opera, and there was so much that we had to adjust and we had to be flexible with when we went into that. And then bringing that onto the production side, there were so many things that we started out with one idea, and through the process, it became something totally different. And we had to be flexible to accomplish that. And I think the fourth and one of the most important things that Ingrid and I both learned a lot about, and that kept us alive and sane through this project, was how to delegate. Because there was a lot that had to happen. There still is a lot that has to happen. And we had to be able to say to our team members, here's this thing that I'm going to trust you with, and I trust you to get it done. And we had to let that go and trust that our team members were going to do that. So I think those and what Ingrid talked about were some of the most important things that we learned through this project.
Yep. To add to delegation, that only happens when other people are also encouraging you to continue delegating. And I'm very thankful for the people in the whole process that said, hey, wait, I'll do that, stop. Because we need that sometimes also. So those are some things that we learned about student leadership in a creative process, and we thank you for letting us share them with you tonight.
And shameless plug. Saturday at 7 p.m. at the Noah Lift Center, which is kind of down on West End, is the final performance of Requiem for the Living in Opera. So we would love to see all of you.
Where do we get tickets?
Tickets can be reserved by calling. There's 2 phone numbers on the posters around campus or on the Facebook event. You can call that number, or you can purchase tickets at the door with cash or with card.
Woo.
Yes.
What time is it?
7 p.m.
$12 for adults, $5 for students.
I feel like a lot of what you guys talked about is very applicable for all student leadership. Was there anything that really stood out for you with this being a creative endeavor that you feel maybe wouldn't apply to other student leadership, or just anything about it that stood out specifically?
Yeah. So this could apply to a lot of leadership positions, but I think in the creative process there's a lot of pride in your art and in your work, because there's a very personal connection to what you're doing, especially as a writer or a composer or a designer. You pour a lot of your heart and your soul into that. So working with our writing teams, you saw how big the writing and composition teams were. Working with those groups of students to facilitate each one of them to do their best work and to keep putting their heart and soul into the project, even if they weren't the focus of that moment. So keeping everyone's pride in check in a good way, where that's still a motivator and not a hindrance. Any other questions before we finish?
You should all come see it on Saturday.